This is Curley Lawson, LICSW. Of your discretion. I am not offering clinical guidance in this podcast. So I'm not advising, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not giving any clinical guidance at all. This is purely educational. If we have an opportunity for an off-ramp to something healthier, most people will take that off-ramp. What if the off-ramp to something healthier is labeled in a language that you can't read? In our cases, it's comic books and Dragon Ball, and ultimately, the good guys are going to win. They're going to be setback. There's going to be someone's going to level up, power up. Something's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. But we know eventually the good guys are going. They present that message to us over and over again, despite all the challenges, the surprises. Eventually it's going to work out. We need that. We need those messages.
Welcome back to Win the Night podcast. I'm very excited to have our next guest on. One of the things that I always looked forward to doing at some point was having professionals on the show. And so I want to welcome a new segment of Win the Night. And what we're going to do with this is, over time, we're going to follow the story, in this case of our next guest, from childhood as we have before, but in this case we'll do it in a mini series. So stay tuned for the next portions of this to come. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next guest, former veteran of the Air Force, a therapist with trauma therapy experience. Curley Lawson, please welcome on the show.
Josh, good morning, and thanks for having me. And I'm excited about today. Looking forward to diving into some amazing and wonderful things. And again, I appreciate being a guest.
Yeah, thanks so much. There's a lot we're going to get into this episode. We're going to start from the beginning, as they say. I'd like to give kind of like the chance of to explore, really, if you'd like to go on that journey, to explore what it was like being a young Curley.
Yeah. So years ago, while I was on active duty, I had to write my bio, and I cribbed a line from Steve Martin in The Jerk that says, "I was born a poor black child." So while not quite the experiences he had in the movie, I'm originally from Chicago, Chicago South Side, and was born and raised in the city. And it's and what's interesting about my experiences, and it's probably true for most people, is where we grow up, we just think that's normal. That's just how the world is. So I had working class parents. Originally went to, originally when I was very small, lived in the projects. So lived in Cabrini Green, which I don't know if you've ever seen the show Good Times. So it was that sort of, that sort of life.
Yeah.
And then later on, my parents, bought a home and moved further south in the city. So again, to a neighborhood that was in transition in that time. I don't know if how familiar you are with the concept of white flight, but I think the neighborhood that we moved into was at the end of this transition from moving from, going from a predominantly white neighborhood to a predominantly black neighborhood and black area. And went to a public school there, and had this great American experience in this blue collar working neighborhood. My best friend lived next door. I was in a neighborhood full of kids, was able to walk to school. So all the things that I think most Americans say they want for their family is what I experienced. But also, there was poverty. To be honest, there were elements of, crime in a neighborhood. There were drugs in a neighborhood, and certainly not everybody and not every person. But I think most people that grew up in an urban setting, they recognize that there's some elements of crime and poverty and some of the woes that go along with that. And as a young man, learning to navigate all of that. So what's a normal experience for an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old? So I had them, playing tag and football with my friends, but we played in the street. I don't know if you ever played tackle football with friends in the street and not in a park. So that's kind of rough. And we had to invent games, and we didn't have everything, but we had imagination, and we built forts and clubhouses and all of those things that are just a part of the normal American boy experience were a part of my life. But I also saw substance abuse, and I saw alcohol abuse. I saw the underbelly of what poverty can bring for people, and and I think my parents were doing their best, like most parents were, to shield and protect their kids from that. But that was also a very real part of my world. The other thing that I understand now that I didn't understand so much then was the challenge of expectations. Like, what was I going to grow into? What man was I going to become? And there were real challenges there at that point. And in my life, there weren't lots of people like that looked like me on TV that were successful. So I didn't have, like those type of role models, or, very many of them. And so the expectation of success from the community was maybe middling, because I want to speak for everyone. The expectations of success from my parents were like pretty high. They, like me and my siblings were expected to do well in school, and there were, standards that we had to meet. So that was a little bit of a challenge, an internal challenge for me. Was, wow, what do I like? Do I hang out with the guys in the hood, or do the things that my mom and dad want me to do? And my father was a vet. My father was a combat vet. And as a therapist, I understand that my father was a combat vet with undiagnosed and untreated PTSD. So, and what a lot of people don't understand about PTSD, like most people think PTSD means Rambo and like very dangerous and anything like that. But PTSD as a diagnosis is actually very self-protective. I mean, like PTSD has one purpose, and that is to keep you alive. That is what PTSD is. It is this it overrides everything else with the goal of keeping you alive, not keeping you happy, not keeping you satisfied, not keeping you connected, not keeping you, not even keeping you involved, but it does keep you alive. So my father, raising a house full of kids, me and my siblings, with PTSD, and like many people, treating the symptoms, himself. So a lot of people, they treat their symptoms, with alcohol or substance. I didn't know that my father ever used any substance, but definitely used abused alcohol. So I'm not really in the professionally. I don't tell anyone that they are or not an alcoholic, but there are standards of alcohol abuse. So I think it's up to everyone to decide for themselves if they're an alcoholic. But alcohol abuse can actually be, diagnosed, and using the current standards of alcohol abuse and even alcohol dependency, my father definitely met those criteria for alcohol abuse and alcohol dependency. And so that showed up for like me and my siblings in lots of ways. What do you do when your father, who loves you and you love, can go 0 to 60 in anger instantly? And I like to tell people that anger is the calling card of PTSD.
There's a few things that I'd like to cover. I think there's so much I'd like to know about, specifically this part of this section of what you just said. One of the things that I could say that I relate to a lot is the coming from poverty. When my parents split, there was for a long time I experienced essentially that was it was just my mom for a while, and so I experienced really, I didn't know I was poor. As a kid, you don't really know. Like for me, I didn't know that we didn't have much money. I just knew that I had what I had, and sometimes I could get some things I wanted, and sometimes I couldn't. And it wasn't until much later, obviously, that I started to learn what the classes were and what middle class and the upper class and lower class. It wasn't until I was much older that I figured out that, oh, actually I was pretty poor back then. And so, but I think that like that sense, I think that having been poor really taught me to value the things that I had. Because I wasn't always able to get new things. And so if something broke, I couldn't expect for it to be replaced right away. I knew that I had to take care of this thing because for all I know, that I'm not getting anything for a long time. And so I think that it really taught me to cherish the things that I had and to take care of them, and to not constantly want not just throw it about and then not take it for granted. I think that's one of the things that poverty really taught me. And so to that point, I think that while of course poverty does have its negatives, the positives that I think that I took from that was that I learned to value early in my life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that the poverty like taught me, and I'm certain this is true for others, that the words that you said, like value, we begin to understand what we can have and what we can't have. Like that starts showing up for kids in poverty, pretty quickly. Oh, mom, nope, put that back.
Right.
Oh, okay. What if we have this type of cereal? Because you see the commercial and you want that type of cereal. No, that type of cereal costs $1 more than this type of cereal. Oh, that cereal's boring and I hate it. But so poverty teaches us very quickly. We get a sense of, even though we don't really know the budget or know our social class, we start getting an understanding of social class. And one of the reasons that, we may not know like where we are in that social class is, I basically had all the things that my friends had, so maybe I had a new thing and my buddy had a new thing, but collectively we had really the same sort of things, and our parents shopped in the same stores. So if someone got like, the newest, shoes or whatever, that was a really big thing. And even to the fact that, something like a pair of shoes can be so valued is because it becomes representative. It's not really, very often it's not about the shoe. It's about what that shoe represents. Wow, I have the thing that they have. And that can even move up as we age to, cars and other things. Wow, I have the thing that they have. And so that representative wealth, or that representative display of wealth, it becomes, very important. And also the idea that, if it's broken, you're not getting another one. So you either learn to take care of it or you just don't have it anymore. So so that's a challenge. I mean, the things in my life have, changed over time. And so it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm only going to have like this one pair of shoes or that or whatever. And now I'm at a point, well, if something breaks, it's, now I'll update it, replace it, whatever. That's not an issue, but that's not how I was raised. And sometimes I consider that. I have conversations with my siblings, and all of us have something from our childhood that we have decided we are never eating again. Like I'm never eating whatever that was, because I had so much when I was a kid, and it was always the way, well, money's tight and payday's not for 3 days, so we're having this. And that all of us have a thing that we have like never eaten again since we're able to go out and be on our own.
And now you mentioned your siblings. How many siblings did you have?
Oh, I grew up in a house full of kids. So my parents together had 6 children, 2 girls and 4 boys. And before they were married, my mom had a son and my dad had a son and a daughter. So the 6 of us that my parents had together, we were raised together. And my oldest siblings, they lived in another city.
Now, I'd like to know, because I have some similar. So I have a total of us. There are 6, but different fathers. And so my mom and dad had 4 children together, with me included, and my mom had, and my oldest brother is of a different father, and my youngest sister is of a different father, and so I for me anyway, those siblings were always, I saw them as 100% siblings. So I'm interested. What was that experience like? Did you get to see them much growing up?
Well, I didn't get to see them much, but also the age difference between us is, because I have one younger brother. Everyone else is older than me. So my oldest siblings, they were at a point, they were, teenagers, and even if we were raised in the same house, I probably wouldn't have seen them, very often. I mean, like, a 1-year-old doesn't have a whole lot in common with a 15-year-old. So they were out, when I was born, they were already teenagers. So I didn't see them very much, but it was always exciting to see them when they came to town. We went to like where they lived. That was always a very, very exciting experience. And also there's an element of like cool factor. Like my oldest siblings were very cool, and from my eyes, we're living this, sort of mysterious, exotic life, because I didn't really see them. But
Right.
when you're 5 or 6, all adults are mysterious and
That's
exotic in their own way.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Both like in the sense that if, let's say, you look up to your dad or your mom or whoever, and I've learned this through therapy, is that at first you what's the word? Like you put them on a pedestal, but you idealize them, and then you demonize them as you become older and you realize their faults. And then the thing that we want to get to is the humanized part. And so I think that's the when you're a kid, you not only idolize people because of that, like of the, oh, well, how are they doing all that? They must be a superhero. And also the mystery aspect of it is also one of the things that it's why I think superheroes are so appealing to kids. It's because they're mysterious and they just seem to do things that you just don't understand how they could do. So that's an interesting point. I do agree with that.
But also the aspect, particularly for boys, superheroes and monsters are usually, the reason there's a degree of fascination is that superheroes and monsters are more powerful than dad. So while dad is powerful, dad can't beat up Batman. Like, dad's not that powerful. Dad can't take Spider-Man, or the Wolfman's got to take dad down. So we have a degree of fascination with these beings, these concepts that are more powerful than dad. Because for, kids that are raised in a household with their fathers are typically the most powerful person that, a 4-year-old knows. You want to cause a tiff between, 2 6-year-old boys. One says, oh yeah, my dad can beat up your dad. No, he can. My dad, man, those kids will fight to show whose dad is the toughest dad, because that's the pinnacle of power in our life at that point. And you're right, they are idealized. They are on this platform. They can do everything. And at that point in our lives, well, they literally can. Like, what decisions does a 5-year-old get to make? Right. What toy they're going to play with? They don't get to decide what to eat, what to wear, where they go, anything. All those decisions are made for them by, the most powerful figures in their life. And as we gain more autonomy, then we get to start seeing, the real humanity, and along with the real humanity is flaws. So we go from seeing the power to we start focusing on a lot of flaws. Well, why aren't they doing this? They could do this if they didn't do that. If they weren't this, they could do that sort of thing. I struggled with the fact that both my parents smoked. And so, for anyone struggling with money, I was a kid, obviously I didn't smoke, but it was like, well, hey, if you weren't smoking, like, that money could be coming my way. Like, that's right. That's a kid's perspective. If you didn't drink, that money could be not specifically coming to me, but maybe be used, in a way that I felt was more beneficial than drinking or smoking. But as a kid, you don't really get to say, well, if you aren't, quite literally, spending the money on these things that I don't approve of. You could be spending the money on things that I approve of.
Right.
And
And you mentioned a little bit about your dad and him having had a level of a drinking problem, so to speak. Um, when did you become aware of that? Was there like, were you just
that
scared
is
of
a
your
great
dad?
question. That is a great question. When did I become? That is a really, like, when did I become? It's like, when did I become aware that the problem was the problem? So probably 5, 6 or so, when we start being able to, cause and effect really start showing up. Wow, man, dad is fun. We had fun watching a TV program or doing something, and he was enjoyable, but there was no alcohol. Wow, dad drank and he was angry, and so yeah, so probably about that age. You know, I I've done my own therapy, and I'm a therapist, and I got to tell you, Josh, no one has ever asked me that question. So, uh, so
Well,
that is a question
hopefully that's not a bad thing.
no, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It just means that there's always something more to explore, and 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 maybe I was even told it was a problem. I don't know. Like when that awareness, that exact moment of awareness, I'm not really sure about that, but that is something that I'll reflect. It's like, when did I become aware that the problem was a problem, or as I understand it to be a problem?
Yeah. Well, that's the reason why I asked that question is because for me, there was a moment in my childhood where I began to at least be aware that I didn't feel safe, that not necessarily that I knew what that word was,
Mm.
but that I felt that I felt scared in some sense, like not peaceful, not calm. I felt as though some level
Mm.
of fear,
Yeah.
and I was at home, and I didn't understand that of why do I feel this way. In fact, I asked that question. I was maybe like 8, specifically with my stepdad, because I didn't grow up really with my dad. I was like 5, like I mentioned, when my parents split. So for me, I met my stepdad. Well, my mom and my stepdad started dating right around the time I was like 8, and so obviously they once they moved in, which was not too long after I met him, actually, was so I don't know how long they were dating previous to that, but when I met him from the time to when we moved in was probably within a year, and so I would have been like 9 at the oldest
Mm.
I started living around him, and that's when I started to notice the things that I even asked, like, why do you have to speak to me that way? Like, there was just this way of this disdain in his voice, this sense of
Mm.
like he doesn't like me. And so for me, there was that moment where I knew something wasn't right. Like something wasn't, I didn't understand why it had to be that way. And that's something that sticks out in my mind. So that's why I was asking, because that was the moment for me where I realized something. So the problem was the problem. So as you
Yeah.
say,
Right. And for me, like going back to something that we were talking about a few minutes ago, like comics. So I was an avid reader, like at that point. So I was a comic collector, read all kinds of books. So I don't know that I felt unsafe, but there was not calm at points. And sometimes it's like, kids that grow up in an environment where there's substance or alcohol abuse, like we become like pretty good weather forecasters. Third drink, storms on
yeah,
the way, kind of thing. So kind of like retreat. And I retreated into this world of, hero and fantasy and sci-fi and things like that. So I pretty much had a book in my hand for just about from the time I could read when I was at home. If I was out with my friends, we're doing kid stuff and running around and and whatever it is that like 8-year-olds we're doing. But when I was at home, I was pretty much in my own head. That was escape from, for me, what was chaos and confusion, and my parents were disagreeing or fighting or something like that. then, that was, that was my relief from that. So even to the point now, because I talk to my siblings weekly, and we'll discuss things from childhood, and I'll go, where was I? Like, I don't remember that. Where was I when that happened? And they're like, you were there, you were like reading a book, you had a comic book or something like that. I mean, so there were all these things that now I recognize that it was, while not fully, I wasn't psychologically dissociated. I was intentionally sort of dissociated. I put myself and my focus into another place completely. So when I could see the storm on the horizon, I was like, well, I'm getting out of here. And much like Batman, I retreated like to some kind of a bat cave, but that was a place that was, for me, it was calm. It was also predictable. I mean, and like in comics, eventually the good guys win, and I read read a lot of mysteries. So Sherlock Holmes is going to solve the case, and we're going to figure things out. And so that gave me a degree of structure and order that the real world didn't always give me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, by the way, about the. In fact, that's actually what my childhood was like as well. When things were happening, I didn't even realize that was a thing, that like it was a built-in system already from my older siblings. So what I did was a learned behavior from what my older siblings were doing, which was to retreat into a fantasy world, as you say, which in this case is, for us, was like the Japanese animes, like the whatever was on Cartoon Network. And in this case, for me, we're big fans of the Dragon Ball series, and so that comes from my older siblings. They were watching it back then when it was on TV all the time. And so I as early as 4 or 5 years old, which is some of my earliest memories, I remember when it was just my siblings and I, and particularly my brothers, because I had, just like you mentioned, I had four brothers, they're 4 boys, me included. So I have 3 older brothers, and then 1 older sister, 1 younger sister. So 2 sisters and then 4 brothers. So the group, I guess, that I grew up with the most was my brothers. And so we would huddle together and watch Dragon Ball late at night. And I remember that my mom and dad at that point were already like not really on good terms. So I don't even have memories of the time in which my mom and dad were like hanging out together. I don't remember spending time with both my mom and my dad, except for maybe like church. But other than that, I think by the time that I was born, there was likely already a ton of, resentment for one another. And so I don't even remember that. But I do remember the us late at night spending, in the mornings, spending time watching TV and watching Dragon Ball, and that was our escape. Like that, we played video games. Like the Nintendo 64 was big back then, and so then we would escape to video games and fantasy worlds, because that now I know was our way to escape the reality that we weren't in a very healthy environment.
All right. And when we're not in a healthy environment, it's very much human nature to want to get to something healthier. We don't always understand what it is. We don't always know that there's work involved to getting us something healthier. But, if we have an opportunity for an off-ramp to something healthier, most people will take that off-ramp to something healthier. We don't always recognize it though. So what if it's almost like, what if the off-ramp to something healthier is labeled in a language that you can't read? So you see that sign, but you don't know what it says. So you go, you go with what you know, or you go with what you can do. So in our cases, it's comic books and Dragon Ball, and there is a degree of relief and escape, but also familiarity. And I'm not super familiar with Dragon Ball, but ultimately, the good guys are going to win. They're going to be a setback. There's going to be, someone's going to level up, power up, something's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. But we know eventually the good guys are going to win. And there is a degree of emotional and psychological security and understanding. Eventually it's going to work out. So they present that message to us over and over again. despite all the challenges, the surprises, eventually it's going to work out. And we need that. Like, we need those messages of eventually it's going to work out, particularly if we're living in a world where it doesn't look like it's necessarily going to work out, or we don't know what working out means in the world that we're living in. So there is comfort in going to a world where, oh, I know what working out looks like and what it's going to be like, and we want that.
And I think that you mentioned speaking to your siblings about this stuff, and that's actually the case with myself and my oldest brother. Because I had brought up him, and I spend the most time together out of all of the siblings as my oldest brother and I. In fact, the shirt that I'm wearing right now is a business we have together, and so we gather every week. And so one of the things that we talked about, which was super interesting, because I was like, what was it like from your perspective, because you're the oldest, so he beat me by 12 years, and so like he was so much older when all that stuff was happening, and he has memories of things that from when I wasn't even born yet. And so I kind of like dug to figure out more of what the dynamic was like between my parents before I was born. And he said that he had a distinct memory of him growing up in like grade school and a little bit older than that too, but he said that he remembered hearing about parents splitting up, like people, classmates around him, and he said that he felt as though that would never happen, like between my mom and my dad. And that was just an interesting perspective, because I didn't see it that way. Like for me, I was like, I don't even remember them spending time together. So for me, that splitting up was more of like well, I didn't even see them together anyway. Yeah. And he lived a different experience. So it's just interesting that when you ask the perspective of the other siblings of what their relationship is like, for in this case, in your parents, how different or similar were their perspectives?
Yes. So, and that is such a, those are questions that my siblings and I have discussed, and it's something that I've shared, with my siblings, is that our relationships, like everyone, all of our relationships with our parents were a unique relationship. So my oldest living brother, we discuss that sometimes, and I'll say, man, when you left home, because kids grow up and they move out, I was still a teenager, I was still living in this environment. Like, you didn't see any other things that I saw. And to be fair, obviously I didn't see any of the things that he saw, before I was born. So it's this Venn diagram. We have these overlapping memories, but his are influenced in a way that mine aren't. And then later on, my memories are influenced in ways that his aren't. And we each have pieces of the puzzle that the other doesn't have. He didn't see the things that I saw after he left. I didn't see the things that he saw before I was born. The siblings that are between us, we all have different pieces of that. And there are also things, this is one thing that I understand, and I tell family, when I do family therapy, is that, parents love their kids, because all kids want to know. This is something anyone that has siblings that have gone to a parent and asked, like, who do you love the most? Everybody wants to know that. Everyone wants to be loved the most. Like, and especially if we feel like we're not loved or not loved. Yeah. Who do you love the most? And what I understand now is that parents, certainly by and large, if they're healthy or trying to be healthy, they love their kids. They love their kids equally, but not identically. And each kid needs different things. And sometimes kids just vibe with the parent in a way that other kids don't. One of my brothers and my dad were just cut from the same cloth. Mm-hmm. That was his mini me. They just got it in a way that I didn't. Right. So, and it's not that my dad didn't love me, but I didn't understand him the way, my other brother did. They shared interest and, and different, like mindsets and stuff like that. And that's nobody's fault. That's not a good thing. That's not a bad thing. And there were times, particularly when I was younger, it's like, well, man, he doesn't love me like that. which is true. He didn't love me like that. He loved me the way that he loved me.
Right.
And so that's the humanizing aspect that you were talking about is, and if we don't, and kids want fair, man, fair is the domain of children. Fair is, I want half that cookie. I don't want 49% of that cookie. I want half. And if I get 49% and that other sibling gets 51, that is a grave injustice. Children live in that domain of fair, and we want 50-50. The reality of life is that it's not always going to be 50-50, and sometimes it shouldn't even be 50-50. But we can feel that injustice about that. So when I talk to my siblings about our relationship, now I'm at a point in my life where I can consider all of those factors together, not just like my 8-year-old or my 10-year-old perspective, but the time that my sisters were going through things and they needed my parents in ways that I didn't. My 10-year-old self could say like, oh my gosh, they're giving them so much more than they're giving me. But they needed more than I needed at that moment. So that's very helpful for us to have those conversations now. And we also recognize each of us had a very unique relationship with our parents that was reflective of our own uniqueness, and also what was going on in the world and how our parents were growing. I laugh with my siblings. They go like, yeah, when you all were babies, you're like, mom and dad were super attentive, and oh my gosh, and only like the fever's going up like 1 degree, race them to the ER. I said, me and my younger brother, by the time we got along, it was like, well, here's a loaded gun, some car keys, and a ball of scotch. Good luck, boys.
Yeah.
we're 3, like maybe. So it's so even parental experience changes with each child.
And so I'd like to ask too about when you talk about the difference in, or at least feeling as though there's a difference in treatment. I know that's something that I've heard before, specifically from my sisters too, particularly pertaining to my mom specifically. But did you ever get a sense of, I mean, in this case, you might have had, did you feel any jealousy towards sibling, and if any siblings, and if you did, how did you navigate that? How did that affect your relationship?
Yeah. Well, no, again, great question. And yes, I could see that my older siblings had responsibilities that I didn't have. My sisters were charged with, taking care of me and my younger brother, and they didn't want to take care, and I got that. I mean, I got it then, and I really get it now. I mean, it wasn't about me or my younger brother. They wanted to do their own thing. And that makes sense. I have one younger brother, and that when we were kids, it was just like, from my perspective, he would disagree, is that he got on scot-free for everything. It's like, he did that. That's fine, And I was like, what if I did that?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yes, my siblings have responsibilities, and how my parents parceled out those responsibilities wasn't always fair, and it may have been, according to different abilities or what they thought could happen. Some of it was gender specific. I know my sisters had girl responsibilities growing up, and I could see that even as a kid, like, oh man, they're responsible for, cooking and, in a way that my brothers weren't, and things like that. There was, shared responsibilities about, house cleaning and things like that. But there were different levels of responsibility, and there was also some frustration about those responsibilities too. I get an older sibling tasked to babysit or watch or take care of a younger sibling, be in that caregiving role when they want to be with their friends is, really frustrating. And my younger brother and I, we're really close in age. So I never had to watch him. If he needed to be watched, I needed to be watched. Basically, my parents just liberated us both at the same time, and kind of like, yeah, you're 10 or whatever. You can probably not, kill yourself if you're left alone for a couple hours. So they were fine with that. But prior to that, someone had to watch us, which meant that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. So I can understand that there was real frustration about that.
Now, I'm curious to know, identity is a big part of growing up, of figuring out who you want to be. And for people, I think for a lot of people, it happens throughout different stages. I think that is maybe, at least for me, it's been an ongoing experience as far as development of personality. I think that it has continued, but I think where it was most noticeable or integral to what was happening around me was in my adolescent years, where, around high school, end of middle school, early high school, was when you try to like figure out what group you belong to, what niche interests you, and an identity of self kind of starts to form. Because I think as a kid, you just kind of want to fit in. At least that was my experience. I just want to be liked. I just want to be somewhere where I feel protected, or I feel in some sense a sense of belonging. And so for me in my early childhood, what I liked specifically, like in cartoons and anime and all that stuff, that was decided mostly by just my interactions with my siblings. And that's when I felt closest and most secure and part of something, was when I was watching those shows. So that became a part of my personality early in life. But as I became an adolescent, where I started to try to figure out what group I want to hang around with, because obviously when you become a teenager, it stops being cool. At least it was for my brother. My older brother, he beat me by like a year and 9 months. And so he would, I remember when he reached that age, 12, 13 years old, he stopped wanting to be around me. When we went to middle school together. And so when I got into middle school, he was in like 8th grade. I was in like 6th grade. And I remember he didn't want to like walk with me to school. So he's like, I'm going to go ahead. So he went ahead of me and I would be just lingering behind him. And I think that's when there's like things start to happen where it's like, I want to have my own stuff. When was that for you?
Man. So like most kids, that's part of normal phase of development. So really about 12 or so, 11 or 12, that identity, we go through a process of, with the ultimate goal of getting to identity achievement. Like, this is who I am. So like we're really separating ourselves from peers, from family, maybe finding new peers, new interests. So that really started for me about 11 or 12, really became more notable because like my interests were varying. And kids, we grow up and we are interested in what's around us, and we're interested in who's around us. That's what we know. So as I got an opportunity to be able to explore more in the city and be able to travel, and the world started opening up to me, like I really wanted more, and I wanted different. So that was something else that was really kind of starting to stand out for me. Was I grew up, playing football in the street and baseball and things like that with my friends. And I wanted to go to a museum. I wanted to check out like whatever like this cultural thing was. I wanted to go to a different part of the city. And at that point, there seemed to be maybe some, maybe invisible boundaries that I was beginning to push against,
Right.
and certainly in Chicago, and having, but also being able to recognize, I can go anywhere and I can check things out. So I began to grow in my own way, really about that time. So that like I remember recognizing even like my musical taste was changing and becoming different. And one day in school, someone was asking me about like, a band or a record or something. And I'm like, well, I don't know, but I listen to this. And they're like, I don't know what that is. And it's like, well, it's what I'm listening to. The other thing about being different, my younger brother and I were a year and a half difference in ages. And like we went to different high schools. Like he intentionally went to another school.
Oh, really?
Like I don't want to be in this, like I don't want to be in the same school with you.
Oh, wow.
He was like, well, I have my own friends, own experiences, whatever. And And there was, so like we had high school rivalry in our house sometimes. Yeah, my school's better than your school. My team's gonna be your team, kind of thing, which was fun. And I was happy for him in that aspect of not wanting to be in anybody else's shadow. And I didn't really feel like I was in the shadow of my siblings. So, and as it turns out, for a variety of reasons, yeah, we all wound up going to like different schools at different times, particularly in high school. So I don't know. Actually, no, I don't know that any of us my siblings that were in the same high school at the same time. I have so many questions to ask them now. I started taking notes of. I need to ask my siblings this. Yeah, I don't recall them discussing being in the same schools at the same time. I know that that there were some challenges about who could go to what school and why, and there's, I got to be honest, I think that there's lingering pain, particularly for one of my siblings who was denied an opportunity, to go to the school of choice because of a decision that my parents made. So, and it is amazing, and they've moved on in life and been very successful, but still that idea of, well, that's what I wanted, and I wasn't able to have that. And there can be some lasting pain, even from those high school experiences. But getting more back to me specifically, about that time, I was changing. I was, like I said, I was a constant reader. So I moved on from, comics and fantasy and dove deep into the, Stephen King and things like that. He was a great author, but also was beginning to show me, the books that I was reading was beginning to show me this world that was out there. And I have a very distinct memory of watching a documentary about that age about the Eiffel Tower, and just saying to myself, oh, I'm going there. Why? I don't know. I mean, it must have been a great documentary because it really captured me. I was like, man, I am going there. And that was, I told myself I was going there, and I've been there a couple of times. So that idea of instilling my future self, my adult self, beginning to emerge at that time. And it didn't mean necessarily letting go of anything that was around me, but it did mean reaching out and looking for more and reaching for more. So that was something that, that was something that I'm very appreciative of that I got from my mom and dad, was the idea of you can do more, you can get more. They never said, you have to be, doctor, lawyer, or engineer or anything like that, but they did really encourage you can be more. And I know that they wanted my siblings and I to have greater success than they had, basic American dream. Right. You can do more than I've done. You can go further than I've gone, with no real specifics about that, which I am grateful for, because that's another aspect of identity that a lot of kids have to navigate, is when they're told what they're going to be. Oh, you're going to be this. So they don't get to choose. They don't get to reach really identity achievement. They are in, I'm forgetting the exact phrase for it. It's not identity diffusion. It's the thing that will come to me at 3 a.m. I wish I could remember.
That's right.
Now.
That's right.
But there are multiple aspects of identity growth that kids go through, and it's almost basically they're deadlocked into something. They're not choosing. They're being told what their identity is going to be, and that can also be a trap, And so I didn't get that. I got you can do, but not specifically what I had to do. And about 12 or so, that really started to emerge.
And so I'm interested, because around those years too is when you mentioned a pushback or a forming of boundaries starts to happen. And at least it was the case for me for me as a young kid, I was always very shy, but there was a point, there was like an inner sense of justice that emerged pretty early,
Yeah.
that I can remember of this isn't, or at least I need to say this isn't fair. And then if I get, eventually as a kid, especially with a parent that isn't interested in what you have to say, or in this case, it was my stepdad that wanted us to be quiet and not make noise and not be a burden on him. And so what that created was this sense of I feel like I'm being pushed back. And so as a kid, I used to at least say, this isn't fair, or why are you doing this? And then I would go and be silent. I wouldn't push back after he would get upset. And so, but as a teenager, there became that sense of no, I need to push back more. And there was more of like that inner self that is emerging that doesn't want to be silenced. And so I'm curious, in your case where you mentioned about your dad, that he, with his drinking, was there a time in which you and him had more of a confrontation about that?
Not so much, not so much a confrontation. I think for me it was an understanding of his life is hard. I think is what I got to. I have memory of my dad, and like a lot of people, first of the month, sitting down, paying bills. So I have this very distinct memory of him like sitting at a table, checkbook in hand, bills and going through things, and just as a kid, just thinking, man, being an adult is hard. Is a thing that came up for me. It was like being an adult is hard, and it's not that I didn't want to be an adult, but it was like, well, I'm not having that I'm not having that moment.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Like, I'm not going to do that. So and the drinking, what I came to gather was that that it was not within his control, not choice, it was there. I think for me, there was a degree of acceptance around that, almost like, well, this is who he is. I don't even recognize it. I don't think that it's what he wanted, but also I could see what it was costing him. And, costing him in a relationship with family and peers and work and things like that. The other thing that I didn't really understand, that I have a much greater understanding of now, was the effects of trauma, and particularly for him, for combat trauma. Like I didn't, because he didn't, stoic, would never talk about that.
Right.
My uncles was in the military, and they were both combat vets. So every now and then when they were together, I'd hear like a little snippet of something he would talk. As far as I know, my uncle was the only person that he really talked to about that. Like that part of his world was like so removed that it was this very mysterious piece of the jigsaw puzzle that so it didn't excuse, but it did explain. And as I grew older and got more of the story and information, and other people were able to color those things in for me, it's like, man, here's someone, with PTSD, and like every day is a struggle, and he's, doing the best that he can. But because of the alcohol and the untreated PTSD, I mean, like there were times that I know that he lashed out at family members. I don't have a real, and maybe this is part of it, I don't have a memory of him particularly lashing out at me in any way. But I know that there were things that happened with my siblings that, as I found out as an adult, I was like, oh my God, like that have been a huge, significant shift for me as a kid or as a teenager had I known that. So, and that's, another challenge that people have about, protecting and, with trauma and addiction and secrecy and shame and things like that. So, but because of that, I was, somewhat shielded from that. So I never really had a direct conflict with him about the drinking. It was just sort of like, I think at one point I just said, he's going to probably drink himself to death. and that with that that understanding, I never saw it getting better. I just saw it getting worse.
Right. And so from your perspective, it was more like a more of a sad like understanding of like this is I feel sorry for him.
Yeah. And I don't, sorry, empathy, even, some combination of that, because I don't want it to seem like, oh my God, I really pitied him. There was,
Right.
there was anger. There was the anger of, what if, I'd already gone through like the why can't, man, things would be so much better, if he didn't drink, and, but he did. And I'm certain all of my siblings and probably my mom had that same that same desire, man, there were just days I just wanted him to be like the other dads. That's all I wanted sometimes, just be like the other dads. And
right.
maybe, have a beer, but not get drunk. Maybe, you have a couple of beers, but not be angry about things. But the other dads, not grappling with PTSD. As far as I know, the other dads definitely not grappling with anything related to combat. That I do know of my friends and my peers. My dad was the only one that served. So they might have had, I don't want to dismiss the idea that no one else had trauma. I mean, I grew up in retrospect, I grew up in a community that was just percolating in trauma. I mean, there were traumatic things just happening. I look out the window sometime and see a traumatic thing happening, like literally saw things happen that were, that would meet the criterion the aid for trauma, but not the traumatic experiences related to combat, which are, in their own way.
Right. I think I've asked quite a bit about what that experience with your dad was, but I also am curious, did you notice how your mom handled it or how it affected your mom?
I did. I did. And I think my mom, like many people, were doing the best that she could. And I believe, and, and this is something when my siblings see this, they'll correct me if I'm wrong. So, but I believe that her coping with that was withdrawal and not conflict. So, just give him his space, and eventually he'll wind down, and things will be things will be okay. So I saw disagreements between them, and but what I didn't see between them was violence. What I wish I could say was there was never violence, but I can say I didn't see violence between them. So I am appreciative of that.
And so then, as you grow a little bit older into your, I guess, more teenage years, for me, there came a point where obviously people start to ask, specifically near like junior, senior year of high school, of what do you want to do with your life? And that phase for me was a really scary one, because I didn't know. Like the years kept going by, and I thought, maybe I'd do this, but it wasn't like a thing that there was just things that I thought were, that'd be neat to know, or how to do, like animation for me. Like I watched cartoons growing up, I'd like to know about that, but there wasn't a thing that I was, let's say, passionate about. I wasn't doing like snippets of animation. I'd like to draw, but I wasn't doing it every day. I wasn't doing it passionately, just whenever I wanted to. It was more of a hobby than really like a career. And so I get into those years, and for me, the military was a thing in the back of my mind. Like I thought of it as like a distant thing. When I was like 12, I really got in, like I mentioned, video games. I grew up with video games all the time. And so for me, influences came around. The biggest one that I can remember specifically about the Marines was when the games started coming out, like the Call of Duty games. And I got to really see, wow, these guys are the strongest people that I bet exist. And so that's where my interest in the military started. But for you, what was the path there?
Circuitous and complicated in a way. And I get the point about like those expectations. I was a pretty good student, and I was a pretty good directionless, aimless student. It was one of those things of, well, you can be anything. Well, I don't know what I want to be, and maybe I don't want to do the thing. And so I believe a lot of people had expectations of me that I didn't even have of myself. So I didn't necessarily feel pressured. And what I did feel was rebellion, was like, I'm just going to go out and just do what I want to do and roam around the city and do ridiculous, dumb teenage things that, is like, man, I'm just staying one step ahead of the law and things like that.
Right.
And so my path to the military was also recognizing, man, I need boundaries. I recognize I needed some framework around me. My dad died when I was 15. So now, the most significant male influence in my life is gone. And I went through this period of, I recognize now, of, deep depression and withdrawal, and again, undiagnosed. I mean, because at that point, at therapy? No, man. Black man going to therapy? Like, no, not at all. That's something other people did. So
right.
No therapy, no medications, no anything. So I'm just roaming around, dealing with depression and really still trying to discover myself, still have to go through all the teenage stuff, but feeling alone. And I just wanted, I don't even know what I wanted: excitement, adventure, challenge. I just wanted different. Chicago is a city that serves up different 24/7. So there's a whole lot. It's just not, and it ain't all good. So I remember I was downtown 3 a.m. and just chaos and confusion, and recognizing this is not good. This is not healthy this ain't healthy for anybody, quite honestly. And then, so I thought about the military, but I didn't really know about the military. What we know about military, we learn from TV and movies and things like that. And maybe somebody's got an uncle or a brother, and those stories can be slightly exaggerated. So you don't know about the military until you're in the military. So what I knew about the military was basically from like TV shows and things like that. And so my path to the Air Force was basically, I look back now and it's sort of like, well, when I watched I Dream of Jeannie, they seemed like they were having a good time. When I watched Gomer Pyle, they were just getting yelled at all the time. So when I watched all these things, it was like, well, it seems like I'm going to go with the people that are having a good time. And it was I wish I could say that it was a well thought out, super discussed decision, but it was not. Another thing that I think had some influence, and I didn't realize it till years later when I was in the Air Force. I told you when I was very small, or maybe I didn't tell you that, like, we went to raised Catholic, went to Catholic school before we moved to further south in the city. And one day, I was years later when I was in the Air Force, and I'm putting on my dress blues. I got my blue shirt and tie and everything, and I adjusted that. And I'm looking in the mirror, and I said, "Oh my God, this is my Catholic school uniform." So, I was like, I was like, wait, is that why I joined the Air Force? And so there could have been a little sprinkling of that in there. Yeah. But it was so maybe it was the idea of, well, this is familiar and they're having fun, or just something like that. I remember talking to recruiters, and for those that are military, I did talk to all the recruiters, and I talked to the Air Force recruiter last, and now I'm more familiar with recruiting tactics, and he seemed the least interested in having me as a recruit. And then I was like, oh yeah,
I'll show you.
I'm going to show you. Everyone else was like, man, we got a contract, son, right now. And he was like, what are you doing in here? Get out of here. And I was like, well played, recruiter. So
it works for the Marines.
So that was my path, man. So a little bit of maybe childhood stuff, not really understanding really the differences, between between the branches at all, and really what the missions were, but also recognizing that, man, I needed structure, I needed order and discipline, and I didn't know how to get that on my own. I knew I could, with the right framework around me, I could be successful. So I enlisted because I was looking for that structure, order, and discipline.
Right.
Around the same time, my best friend was enlisting in the Navy, so he was trying to get me to enlist in the Navy, and I was like, man, I don't want to be in the Navy. Like, you can be in the Navy. So that was that was an interesting divergent path for the both of us. Was that we grew up literally next door to each other, both joined the military about the same time, and so he was like, the Navy was the fit for him, and the Air Force was the fit for me.
And I think this is actually a perfect spot to end this episode here. Thank you so much for that. That was such a great ride. That first one.
Glad. Well, I enjoyed it, and I will encourage everyone watching, tune in next time for
Yeah. This is the first part of a multi-episode series, and so I think that there's a lot more to come, and I don't even know how many parts there are going to be yet, and so
you'll let me know when we're done.
Absolutely.